In celebration of Black History Month, the state is launching a new website telling the stories of enslaved people who built the state capitol. It's called Naming to Knowing. This is set to be the most complete information to date about more than 130 enslaved laborers who worked on that building. Let's bring in WREO Capitol Bureau Chief Laura Leslie. Laura, you talked to that research team today, and so what time period are we talking about with this?
Right, Chris, we're talking about, the current state capitol was built from 1833 to 1840 after the previous one burned down. Here's a picture of what the building looked like in 1870. Rebuilding this thing was a big project at the time, so it took a lot of laborers. Wealthy slave owners here in Raleigh basically rented some of their enslaved people to the state to bring in money. Now, historians knew about that, but they didn't know the names of those people until they discovered a document in the state archives in 2019. Here's a look at that document. I know this text is too small to read on the screen here, but it lists everyone who worked on the Capitol in 1834, their first names and last names, and whether they were slaves. The state historians have been working on this for 3 years now, using newspapers, tax returns, receipts, payroll records, Ancestry.com, you name it, to try to piece together the stories of these people during this period and then after emancipation in 1865.
Oh, and there's just so many Black folk who do not have access to documentation like that to track their family history. So, though a bit heartbreaking to hear, this is at least encouraging to have those names. So what kind of work did the enslaved people do, and were they all, and a little bit more with that, Laura?
Well, they did a variety of tasks. Some worked in the quarry that was just south of downtown, cutting and hauling stone for the building, and others were laborers at the site. Most of them only made about 50 cents a day, and that was paid to their owners. The site includes a letter from one of the slave owners to the state requesting her enslaved person's pay now because she needs it. Some enslaved people were skilled laborers, like Handy Flockhart. He was owned by a furniture and cabinet maker where he learned that trade. He made the desks and chairs that state lawmakers sat in for decades. His desks are still there in the state capitol today. After emancipation, Lockhart became one of the first 2 aldermen of Raleigh, and he was a successful businessman, community, and faith leader for many, many years. His is just one of the amazing stories of the people who built that historic building. You can read more at the website. Again, that's namingtoknowing.org. And they are hoping that people who are related or descendants of these folks will approach them and give them more information to help fill out some of these stories. Chris?
And of course, we would be interested to hear from them to be able to make these connections. Such a powerful story. Thanks, Laura.